And so Season 3 of Star Trek Picard moves on to Episode 5, entitled Imposters. As I always say at the beginning of these videos, full spoilers ahead, so please stop the video now, go and watch the episode, and then come back to me. This is the episode where you get a real sense of the scale of the threat posed by the Changelings, and of course the biggest surprise so far this season, the return of the Next Generation favourite Laren, a defector to the Maquis at the end of the show's 7th season. She was last seen in the penultimate episode of the series entitled Preemptive Strike. This is actually my favourite episode of the season because of her involvement, the plot revelations that follow, and the relationship between herself and Picard. But there's plenty of other things happening in this one. Jack Crusher is having what can only be described as extremely vivid and disturbing violent hallucinations on the ship, and he's once again hearing a female voice in his head saying, "Find me and connect us." Meanwhile, his mother is busy in sickbay analysing the remains of the Changeling who posed as young LaForge. It appears these new Changelings are capable of getting past blood screenings and can even maintain solid form after death. They can mimic humanoid organs also. As Crusher tells Picard in a covert message, Changelings can pass the blood test, capabilities beyond superficial, trust no one. With the saga in the nebula now behind them, Picard and Riker prepare to face the music for coming aboard the Titan under false pretenses, commandeering a shuttlecraft, and endangering the lives of the crew. Riker hands command of the Titan back to Captain Shaw, who is wonderfully cynical and hilarious in equal measure in this scene. Starfleet is on their way, because he called them, and the ship is going to take Riker and Picard into custody. And in the turbolift, a chipper Shaw reminds them that Starfleet will no doubt weigh up any heroics of Picard and Riker against hot-dropping the saucer section of the Enterprise D on a planet, breaking the Prime Directive to snog an alien on Baku, and causing an anomaly in the Devron system that nearly destroyed life in the galaxy. To be fair, technically speaking, the latter event never actually happened outside of Picard's memory of those events, as the timeline was reset at the end of All Good Things, but the banter and saltiness is wonderful nevertheless. Meanwhile, Raffi and Worf continue to investigate whatever else was stolen from the Daystrom station. Their story has probably gone on one episode too long at this point in my opinion. They're back dealing with and fighting underworld types on Metalis. And long story short, they get a device that enables them to bypass security at Daystrom station. Once again, Worf steals the show in these scenes, but there's solid chemistry between himself and Raffi. I do want to focus primarily on the action on the Titan. Laren surprises Riker and Picard when she comes aboard from the Intrepid and proceeds to interview them as part of the investigation. Picard is infuriated by the indignity and irony of being questioned for treason by an actual traitor to Starfleet. He's deeply wounded by her betrayal of him and the uniform all those years ago. He points out that she's no longer wearing her Bajoran earring, and he wonders if she's turned her back on yet another institution. Ro did eventually turn herself in all those years ago, but was recruited into Starfleet intelligence and worked her way up to earn the rank of commander. Now, throughout their scenes together in this episode, I was convinced that she was a changeling, which is what you're supposed to think. You're not really supposed to trust her right away. But when they take their conversation to the relative security and privacy of the holodeck, that's where we learn this is the real Laren. In order for the audience to fully trust this character and verify that she is who she claims to be, it requires the writers to cleverly unpack the relationship between Ro and Picard, for them to express their grievances with each other, the disappointment, the heartbreak, the resentment that they've carried for so many years. She explains that he will never know what it was like to live under his relentless judgment. In many ways, he saw her as a kind of protege. He says she betrayed everything he believed in. But she felt suffocated, believing he wanted to mold her in his image, his mentorship. It was conditional respect in her view. She joined the Maquis because it meant standing up to injustice, even if it meant betraying Starfleet. She was less concerned with the institution and the uniform, but she did value Picard's respect and approval as an individual separate from Starfleet. She feels Picard couldn't separate his relationship with her from their duty and responsibility to Starfleet. She thinks that he should have looked past that and focused solely on the moral aspect of what she was doing. I suppose she hoped that he would be proud of her, but it was quite the opposite. She believes it was Picard's dishonor to confuse morality with duty. Despite all of their philosophical and practical explanations for what happened and who did what, Ultimately, the conversation comes down to one single line that genuinely put a lump in my throat. Picard tells her, "You broke my heart," to which Ro replies, "And you broke mine." Michelle Forbes and Patrick Stewart put in Trojan performances here with their deliveries, and it's yet another emotional, character-driven scene this season. After all these years, the pain and hurt is still very raw between them, and this helps them trust that they aren't dealing with a changeling imposter. What I think is really beautifully expressed in the writing and in the performances in this scene is that you can tell that these characters still care about each other. Ro proceeds to explain that Starfleet is compromised at the highest level. She doesn't trust anyone on her own ship, not even the senior officers. She doesn't even trust the transporters on the ship. Keep in mind that when Laren came over from the Intrepid, she made a point to use a shuttlecraft and not the transporters. Shaw also found this strange, and if you're connecting the dots going backwards, Shaw did remark in the previous episode that a changeling had posed as a transporter technician. Anyway, Ro explains that there's been fleet-wide issues for months, and then proceeds to ask him what he knows about the plans for Frontier Day. He says it's pomp and circumstance, a big anniversary ceremony for Starfleet, and he's supposed to deliver a speech. Ro is very worried that the entire fleet will be on display, and security preparations are all classified. It's days away, and even she doesn't have access. There have been 12 incidents of changelings on multiple starships, all being kept quiet. There's a conspiracy, and Ro has been connecting the dots. But Picard asks, what does this have to do with Jack? She says she was ordered to retrieve him, and that a portal weapon was used to destroy the Starfleet Recruitment Center, the same tech used by Vadic. Picard says they should take this to Admiral Janeway, but Rose says she's tried and cannot get past Janeway's gatekeepers. She says that she has 2 intelligence assets working to discover something else that the changelings want. The audience at this point should be figuring out who those 2 assets are. Obviously Worf and Raffi. Ro transfers most of the Titan crew to the Intrepid, leaving him with a skeleton crew. She tells Picard to take the ship and run. She says she's going to go back to the Intrepid to buy him some time. Before she leaves, with the 2 security officers, she hands Picard her Bajoran earring. She parts by saying she wishes he could look into her heart just once and understand that she only did what she thought was best. And all these years, she wished he'd known her and that she'd known him. Picard has to convince a skeptical Shaw of all of this, but it's clear he's beginning to come around. He can't ignore Picard. Ro heads back to the Intrepid in a shuttle, but the 2 security officers are changelings, and they plant an explosive on the shuttle and then transport back to the Titan and transform into different officers. Now, why the internal sensors on the Titan didn't pick that up is beyond me. Ro is running out of time, and the Titan cannot beam her back. She decides to fly the shuttle straight towards the warp nacelle of the Intrepid. She says to Picard that it's up to him, and he must finish what she started. He tries to talk her out of this kamikaze run. She wants to give them a fighting chance. He tells her desperately that he does see her, everything. He asks for forgiveness, and just like that, after almost 30 years, a character's story arc is paid off and resolved in a profound and meaningful way. The shuttle collides with the nacelle, it explodes. Picard is devastated. The Intrepid prepares to attack the Titan. As Riker points out, they're being framed for what just happened. They have no choice but to run. There's a very cool shot where the Intrepid powers up to attack the Titan. The Intrepid, I think, is actually a very cool design. Shaw once again has to be talked into reluctantly doing the right and sensible thing, going to red alert and warping out of there. Meantime, something bizarre happens. Jack beats the snot out of 4 changelings posing as Starfleet officers with a level of precision even he can't understand. And this time, it's real. He then hallucinates once again about the black tentacle things and the red door. The Titan warps off before the Intrepid's torpedoes can hit them. As Riker says, they're coming for us. Shaw says, but who? Riker replies, everyone. Ro has one last surprise for Picard. Turns out that her earring contained a holographic database of her entire investigation, and they receive a communication from Worf. Also, if you look very carefully, there is a little Easter egg here, and I'm sure lots of other YouTube channels will pick up on this. So there's a piece of text on screen that says, slated for early decommission, and what looks like a picture of the underside of the Enterprise F. The Enterprise F is in this season, and that's not me spoiling anything, by the way. That was confirmed in the trailers. The episode ends in sickbay. Jack confides in his mother that there is something very wrong with him. Episode 5 perfectly sets up the second half of Season 3, weaving the Raffi and Worf investigation into the primary story on the Titan, and also giving us a sense of the severity and scope of this season's conflict. It's a high-stakes paranoia thriller, and now the Titan is on the run, raising the intensity another notch. Now, I have to say, I was genuinely very shocked and completely caught off guard by the surprise appearance of Laren when I first watched this episode several weeks ago. I did not see her return coming, and I was very pleasantly surprised. I didn't think that revisiting her character after all these years and resolving her story arc and past conflict with Picard would prove to be such a satisfying and indeed moving story. Anyway, I thought this was a really well-written installment and another excellent example of a bottle episode. For sure, there's also a new element of intrigue now, given the fact that we know that the infiltration of Starfleet is at the highest levels and no one can be trusted anymore. And of course, then there's the big question, what the hell do the Changelings have planned regarding Frontier Day? So guys, let me know your thoughts on episode 5, Imposters. What did you think? If you're new to the channel, please subscribe. Take care, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.